Hello there, and thank you for tuning in to see what the world looks like through atheist eyes. I'm Frank Zindler from American Atheist Press, and once again today I will be your host for another program dedicated to showing the world what it looks like to atheists and other skeptics and free thinkers. Today's program, entitled Less Than a Carpenter, will be the fourth in a series of 5 interviews I've had the pleasure of conducting with Dustin Lawson, an amazing man whose career has shifted from being a professional trainer of lions and tigers to being a preacher and understudy to the famous evangelical apologist Josh McDowell, and then to being a God-free author of novels and nonfiction works. He now joins us in our effort to bring reason to the world and to bring the world to reason. Let's listen now to his deconstruction of one of Josh McDowell's most popular books. We'll rename it Less Than a Carpenter. Welcome back to my interviews with Dustin Lawson, the former tiger trainer turned evangelist turned a guest on my show. The last time we left with his provoking me with the statement that the Bible is really more open-minded than I thought, or that somebody thought, or what did you say anyway?
More open-minded than the church allows it
to be. It's more open-minded than the church allows it to be. Okay, I took it personally. Okay, all right, well, explain yourself.
Well, when your mind is enslaved to dogma, you read the Bible through lenses, so you miss a lot of parts of it. Mm-hmm. And once I read it again after becoming a skeptic, the Bible actually gained some credibility for me in a way, because I realized that there's so many places in the Bible that teaches the right way to search for truth, which is to challenge everything, to not just challenge everybody else's beliefs, but to turn it back on yourself and challenge yourself as well.
Well, now, where would this be? I don't remember.
Right.
Well, in Ecclesiastes, yes. Maybe. In
Ecclesiastes. That's the foundation.
Okay, yeah.
I like to say that Ecclesiastes is right in the middle of the Bible, as if it's holding both sides together, but nobody wants to deal with it. That's a Christian, because of what I believe is its real message of, free thinking and skepticism. Mm-hmm. Basically, I mean, here is supposedly, I don't think it was probably King Solomon who wrote it, but the church, for the majority, believes that King Solomon wrote it. So let's go with that theory. King Solomon is supposedly the wisest guy who has ever lived.
Yeah.
Wisdom given directly to him by God's hand, and made him the smartest person ever. And if the book of Ecclesiastes is written from the perspective of the end of a man's life.
Yeah,
so he's experienced all of life.
Yeah.
He's challenged everything, and he's like summing up life as if he's close to his deathbed.
Yeah.
So we'll just go with the idea that it's King Solomon, and he says everything's meaningless, potentially, objectively meaningless. I don't see any meaning in it for various reasons. For one, I'm going to die. Everything I worked for, I give to the next guy. Who knows if he's going to be wise or a fool? So he didn't find meaning in all that he had accomplished, because he couldn't assure that it would continue in a positive light. But beyond that, he challenges whether an afterlife exists. In chapter 3, he says, who can tell a man what happens after he's gone?
Yes, exactly.
And he says, who knows if the spirit of an animal goes down into the earth,
right,
and if the spirit of a man rises upward? There's a lot of question marks in there, and not very many definitive answers saying, I know there's an afterlife. Many other places he says, who can bring a man to show him what will happen after he's gone, or after he leaves? And he challenges the existence of, I would say, even challenge the existence of God, even though he uses the word God or whatever it is in the Hebrew that he uses. But I mean, he challenges whether there's any fairness or righteousness in this world. He says, I saw something else meaningless under the sun. I saw righteous men dying young in poverty and wicked men living long in wealth. So what good is that? I mean, there's no system of justice. And just over and over again, he says, I don't know if there's really any true objective meaning plugged into life. I've challenged everything. I still have questions at the end of my life. And it just showed me this is how you search for truth in a credible way. You challenge everything over and over again. The writer of Ecclesiastes is a person who kept his rim high. He didn't lower it. I mean, he had a lot of, it sounds like he had a lot of angst in him from his search for truth, indeed. Because ignorance maybe is bliss. But he said, no, I don't care how painful truth is. The rim stays high. I don't lower it down here to the level of faith determines truth. It stays up here where we need good evidence, and I'll just take the consequences no matter how painful the truth is. And I feel like the book of Ecclesiastes is the greatest treatise on free thinking ever written. If you knock off those last 6 verses that basically were probably written by someone else to soften the message of skepticism throughout it.
To get it into the Bible,
And it's actually my favorite verse of the Bible is chapter 1, verse 11, where it says, "There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow." I think Donald Trump, instead of putting his name on a building, should put that verse right there to show himself, look, no matter how many buildings you put your name on, your name is still going to be forgotten one day, so get over yourself. And I guess it's just a humbling verse for me, as if just to realize how small you are in this universe. Don't take your problems and yourself too seriously.
You know, it's interesting. Many verses from Ecclesiastes were used by Johannes Brahms in his German Requiem and in some of his other concerted vocal choral works. He almost surely was an atheist, and he too was drawn to that book of all the books in the Bible. So you're in good company.
Yes, good.
Well, Brahms is my favorite composer. So,
so anyway. Not just Ecclesiastes, but I'll stay in the Old Testament. The book of Job. I mean, the book of Job for me, after I reread it again, I was like, wow, this shows that the Bible. Okay, sorry, back to Ecclesiastes. If King Solomon is the wisest guy ever, and God gave him that wisdom, then here is the man who challenged everything in the book of Ecclesiastes, and Ecclesiastes is called a book of wisdom, so God must think that great skepticism is great wisdom, because if he made that the wisest guy ever, and he just challenged everything and great doubt, that must be great wisdom. I mean, I came to that conclusion well, I mean, if God exists and did, then he must believe that great wisdom comes from great skepticism, not just dogmatically saying, I know what the truth is. Okay, sorry. Now, the book
before you finish that, I just thought Abelard, Peter Abelard, had the very famous dictum. Of course, it was in Latin, but he said, "Through doubt we are led to inquiry, and through inquiry we are led to truth." And so that ties in with what you've just said.
And this verse isn't in Ecclesiastes, but it's a 4-word verse that kind of helped drive me through my 10-month of searching after Josh. And I think it was the English historian Thomas Fuller, from 2 or 3 centuries ago. He wrote that truth fears no trial. And so I put everything on trial during that 10 months. I said that's so true, that the truth wants to be taken to court by the whole world and challenged because it's confident in its truthfulness, and it knows by being challenged it's only going to make its truthfulness more clear and separate all from all the false theories. Only false theories fear being challenged. I use the analogy, going back to, I use a lot of sports analogies, to the NFL. At the beginning of an NFL season, there's 30-some teams. They all dream of winning the Super Bowl. But many of those teams know they're not good enough to make it, and so they kind of fear the reality check of the regular season, which will expose them as not being good enough. But there's 4 or 5 teams that know, very supremely confident, that they think they're the best team in the league, and they know that the only way to be seen as the best team in the league that year is to go through the grueling regular season, the grueling playoffs, and to win the Super Bowl. So they want all of those challenges because they know that's the only way they can be seen in the eyes of the world as the greatest team. So they want all those challenges. So in the same way, the truth wants to be, it selfishly wants everyone to challenge it because it knows that's the only way it can win the Super Bowl
Yeah.
of being confirmed as the truth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I use that now all the time. Like, any person who gets upset with me for challenging them, I say truth fears no trial, and they know it's true.
Sure,
Because they just don't want it to be true.
They
know that's legitimacy. I wrote an article called "The Illusion of Conviction" basically about terrorists who, I said, don't mistake terrorism as great conviction. When a person flies a plane into a building, don't mistake that as really great conviction in their beliefs. On some level, yes, it is, but see it for what it is. Subconsciously, that is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
They are insecure about the credibility of their beliefs because they know their beliefs cannot get into the ring and fight on the rational grounds of reason, so they have to fight this way.
Yeah, only with violence can they have their ideas survive.
So the greatest conviction, the true conviction, is those people who open up their worldview and say, world, by all means, challenge everything I believe in. That's real conviction. Back to the book of Job.
Okay, another wisdom book, by the way.
God condemns the three friends of Job and Job, but he only praises Job. So he condemns the four people, he condemns them all for the same thing, but then he praises Job for something. What does he condemn them for? He condemned the three friends of Job, the whole book, every time they think they know more than they really do. They think they know the nature of God exactly, and Job is not living up to the standard. They think they're certain they got God right. They got how the world works the right way. And even Job, when he finally lashed out at God, he was then saying, agreeing with them on some level, saying, I know how this world works, God. I know how yours should work, and you shouldn't be punishing me. So he condemns the three friends in Job for what? For thinking they know more than they really do. And then he praises Job once Job finally humbles himself and says what? I don't know. I'm sorry for thinking I knew more than I really did. So basically the book of Job is saying, hey, don't think you know more than you really do. Certainty is ridiculous. You can't understand most of these things, so be open-minded enough, humble enough to admit you don't know.
I've never thought of the book of Job as having an epistemological message. That's very interesting. I always thought it was one of these moral puzzles.
Well,
but
isn't epistemology? If that's not moral, what is?
Yeah.
Is it not immoral to lower the rim down and so that you can claim a false certainty in your beliefs and then go tell the world that you're certain you're right, and then you have to guard your low rim and not let anybody else play on it because they could dunk their beliefs just as easily?
Yeah.
No, I think, a method for searching for truth is maybe one of the most moral issues. But the book of Gideon, or not the book of Gideon, but the book of Judges, the story of Gideon.
The story of Gideon,
Gideon was given a mission by God that he was not qualified for. He said, I need you to raise up an army and go fight. Gideon's like, I'm not a warrior, I can't do this. He challenged God. God said, no, it's you. Challenges God again and says, okay, God, I need some evidence. Make the wool wet, the grass dry. It happens. But that's not good enough. He says, turn it around the next day. Make the wool dry, the grass wet. I can't remember which way it started, but one way or the other.
Yeah.
Again, he challenged God and asked for good evidence. Did God condemn him? No. He gave him exactly what he needed to confirm. And he's like, all right, so what's wrong? So again, what's wrong with challenging even the God, even the Bible shows that it's okay to challenge.
But thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God.
It's not tempting. You're just using the mind that you supposedly were given by God that wants to search with wisdom and reason. Now the New Testament. Actually, referencing I already mentioned it in an earlier episode, but the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Eden is real. But just go with the hypothesis that it is. I think God wanted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit because he wanted the human race to have wisdom. Or else because he didn't give her that ability, he knew, if he's all-knowing, he knew she didn't have the ability to tell the difference between right and wrong. So he wanted the door to be opened up for wisdom.
Well, I mean, why else would there have been the tree there in the first place?
Right. And one of the issues I deal with in my first novel, The Eden Found. Now the New Testament. One of my favorite passages, I can't believe I didn't see this before when I was a preacher, but at the end of the book of Matthew, verses 19 and 20 of chapter 28 is the Great Commission, which
go forth and teach all nations,
evangelize, baptize. But 2 verses earlier, verses 16 and then verses 17, just as powerful, if not a more powerful message. It says, I don't know word for word right now, but they, the disciples, only 11 at this time, Judas hung himself, the 11 disciples went to the wilderness, to the mountain, to see Jesus, and when they saw him, they worshipped him, comma, but some doubted.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I didn't put those 3 words there.
Yeah.
They could have just been left out, but they were there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mention anybody else but the 11 disciples being there. So you're telling me, here's 11 guys who for 3 years spent all their time with Jesus.
Right.
If it's all true, saw the miracles, walk on water, raise the dead, turn water into wine, on and on and on, saw him die and rise from the dead, then spent 40 days with the resurrected Jesus, being able to touch wounds, like, yep, he's real, that's material. And then, after all that eyewitness evidence, in the last moment with him, some of them were still willing to admit there's room for doubt. And then I guess, who was I as a preacher when I got on a stage and told crowds that it was wrong for you to have doubt?
Yeah, yeah.
Who was I? The audacity to say that when we have no evidence, no eyewitness evidence.
Yeah, none at all.
And then here's these 11 disciples who spent all this time with him who are still willing to admit room for doubt. I mean, it just felt like the Bible was telling me, look, it doesn't matter how much evidence you get. There are certainties, not reality. It's an illusion.
Yeah.
There's always room for doubt.
Yeah.
There's always, even if you saw even if you were sitting in the tomb looking at the body of Jesus and you saw it rise up, that's not certainty. There's still, you could be thinking, maybe the devil took on the image of Jesus, his body's somewhere else, and this is really the devil trying to create a myth. Maybe aliens did that. There's always that ability to say there's still possibility.
Yeah, yeah. I've often wondered how those words did get into there, what the text history is. Right. As you know, the Gospel of Matthew, like all of the Gospels, but especially Matthew and Luke, are composites that have a long evolutionary history, part of which we can reconstruct pretty clearly, but other parts are pretty murky. Mm-hmm. And so it was changed repeatedly to satisfy different prevailing beliefs of the communities in which the particular version of the manuscript was being used. And but I've never been able to quite figure out what kind of theology, what kind of a community would have been comfortable with that, but some doubted.
Right.
I've never been able to find a place for that, and maybe somebody can do a PhD thesis on that or something.
Not me. Well, unless they take that as my thesis.
Okay, well, yeah, well, why not? Yeah. I mean, it's all about fiction, right?
But, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on, but I'll talk a little bit more. I mean, let's just go with Jesus.
Okay.
Supposedly, Jesus has 2 recorded moments of doubt in the Garden of Gethsemane and on the cross. Mm-hmm. So here's the Son of God who is having this great moment of doubt in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then he kind of overcomes that and moves forward. And so I'm thinking, if Jesus had to be able to doubt, that makes the story even better that he doubted. Maybe he had doubts about whether he was really the Son of God, really going to rise from the dead, really going to be able to fix everything, and people might say, no, he didn't. But I was thinking that actually makes it even better if he did. I'm not saying I think it. Yeah. I question the credibility of all of it, but I'm just saying that makes his story even better if he had doubts, because you can't have courage without doubt. If the soldier's certain he's going to be able to run across that street, across the battlefield, and grab his wounded friend and pull him back, and if he's certain he's going to make it all right, that's not courage.
Yeah,
there has to be the possibility that he fails and gets killed.
Of course, in this particular situation where we have 2 different Jesuses that we're mixing together, I think indeed, certainly, if Jesus is a God, if Jesus is God, then this doubt is inexplicable. But if Jesus is an actual man who later on is identified as a God, is a real man, even if he's somebody who had convinced himself that he was the Messiah and so on, then yeah, doubt might be would have verisimilitude, as they say. But so we have these two different Jesuses. We have the divine Jesus, where doubt is simply impossible, self-doubt is impossible, and a putatively human Jesus. And of course, it's this putatively human Jesus that most even secular scholars of the historical Jesus take as perhaps evidence of a historical Jesus.
Right.
I don't agree, of course, but that's... But
I mean, well, I guess that you say two different. As a preacher, I would say that's God and man in one, and he just pulled back some of the divinity so that he could doubt. And I just say, look, if he doubts all the way to the cross, that makes it an even more heroic figure, because he doesn't know if he's going to rise. He's going through this, even though he might fail. There's got to be the possibility of failure for it to be really legitimate.
The logical problems in that, though, are insuperable. I mean, how, if he's infinite, how could he not know? I mean,
he in some way pulled it back from himself, right? That's what I mean. There's a person who I got in debate with this, and they got really upset with me when I said I think the story is more legitimate because I think Jesus. I'm going with you. I'm going with you that it's true. I'm just theoretically.
Yeah.
That Jesus went to the cross not knowing for sure if he was going to raise from the dead, and that makes it better. Whereas you think he was certain, and I say if that's true, then that doesn't have much value to me, as much value, because he was certain it was all going to work out. You can beat the crap out of me if I'm certain I'm going to get $10 billion, and if I'm certain I'm going to get this infinite reward on the other side after you beat me up, then I don't really think, it hurts a little bit, but I don't think it really, there has to be the possibility that you don't know that for sure that's going to happen for it to truly be as great as it could be.
This relates to the question of how can this have been an actual sacrifice?
Right.
How can a God sacrifice himself? Right. I mean, that's...
It's not sacrifice unless you give up something.
Really.
You know 3 days later...
you know you're not going to be really dead.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, according to the story, Jesus was really busy during that period. Right. That 3 days, supposedly. Preaching to those in prison, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, this is a terrible problem. And... without, again, no sacrifice, and what you're talking about, you feel it's of greater value to you if he really doesn't know. But at the same time, I'm saying I think that makes it impossible that it could have been an omniscient being. It's just incoherent, I guess, logically. I'm sorry, this is your show.
No, that's fine. I mean, that just brought out, that's a half a dozen things that I said from my first book, Christian Agnostic, where I tried to portray the Bible as being more open-minded. And the reason I did it and wrote that book initially is because I was still on the fence. I wanted to be legitimate in how I searched for truth, so I knew I had to be allowed to be skeptical and ask questions and challenge.
That's this book here, by the way.
Yes.
Christian Agnostic. While we're on this, we weren't going to talk about your books in this. We were going to talk about them in the next program. But since you brought this up, let's talk about this book at least, and then we'll leave the rest of the books to the next program.
But I wrote this as a way for me to be legitimate and still stay within the church. I wanted to create a space for myself where it was okay to be a free thinker and a follower of Jesus. I mean, my whole life was built on this. So if it would have fallen, I like to say the truth destroyed my life, but it was a life that needed to be destroyed in order for it to get more legitimate. But I didn't want it to be destroyed. I wanted to be able to have both reason and Jesus and Christianity. And so I kind of wrote this, and I also wrote this because all of my connections, all of my networking in the publishing world was with the Christian community.
Right,
so
sure.
I didn't want to have to rebuild my network, so I wanted to write a book that was soft enough that maybe they would embrace it. But I also believe that the Bible is more open-minded than what the church thinks, and they're afraid of those parts of the Bible, so they wipe them out in their mind and don't read them. So Christian Agnostic came out of that.
Okay. Now, What other things did you want to talk about in this particular installment? We talked about Ecclesiastes, we've talked about Job and open-minded Bible.
I mean, we've gone through quite a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good... I don't want to explain the whole book.
Yeah, we don't want our audience to fall asleep. All right. Well, we'll sign off then on this for now, and then we'll come back next time and talk about the rest of your books. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching our interview with Dustin Lawson. For now, I'm Frank Zindler for American Atheist. See you soon.